Going to call this meeting to order. My name is Jim Brown, Chair of the Board of Finance. And so we will begin, as we do with all of our meetings, with the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Okay, again, welcome everybody. I look forward to the day when we can have this meeting once again in person. I'm sure that will be next March. So we have with us today our Board of Finance, and I'll introduce the Board of Finance members that could make it today. We did have 3 that had conflicts with work, but we do have our Vice Chair, Chris DeWitt is with us. Jim Walsh is with us, Jack Tustani, Lori Charlton, and John Matola. So as you most likely know, the Board of Finance will vote on this budget Wednesday, March 31st. We do have one more meeting on Monday, the 29th, for one final review. Today is another opportunity for public comment. As we have taken public comment throughout our meetings, and throughout our budget process, both verbally and through email, but admittedly today is unique. It is a day for us as a Board of Finance to listen to the public, and we thank you all for your participation. Before we leave, if our members on the Board of Finance wish to make a final comment at the end of the meeting, it'll be 1 each. They'll have the opportunity to do so. Now, I see the names on the participation list. I will call out that name. If I mispronounce your name, please forgive me in advance. I'll do my best. But please remember to state your name and address for the record. Please keep your comments to 2 minutes, as Mr. DeWitt will be timing. You know, we don't want to be rude, but we want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to speak. So please try to state your comments within those 2 minutes. And as we always have, and this is my 12th meeting on a Saturday, please keep your comments to the budget, and please keep your comments professional. So we've had 5 meetings in March. We have spoken, meeting the Board of Finance. We have spoken to each department head and the Board of Ed and reviewed each budget. As a Board of Finance, we do look at this budget as a whole, including our financial obligations, both short-term and long-term. So all of us, we know what's best for this town. We do our due diligence. We have what I think are healthy discussions. We will pass along a budget to the RTM for their consideration on Wednesday evening. So again, this is a day to express your views. We'll get started, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. So I'm going to go to the participation list, and I'm just going to go right down the line. And I am going to, now some don't have names, they just have call-in user. And we'll see how that works, if you know what call-in user you are. But the first person that I see on our list is Mr. Stephen Baker. Mr. Baker? Mr. Baker, you're on mute. We still cannot hear you. So if you like, Mr. Baker, I'll go to the next one. I'll come right back up to you. Ms. Caitlin Clarkson, Peoria. Caitlin, you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm trying to get my video started here, but that doesn't appear to be working. Okay.
And just please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Caitlin Clarkson Pereira, and I live at 1375 South Pine Creek Road.
Thank you. Your comment, please.
Thank you. going to be brief this morning. Again, my name is Caitlin, and I have a first grader who is in school at Mill Hill Elementary School. I grew up in Fairfield and was extremely fortunate to attend the Fairfield Public Schools myself. I'm thankful every day for the education that I received in this town, and that is the exact reason I moved back to town here, so I could grow up with the same opportunities that I had. And over the past year, we've seen dozens of new families move into town with the same aspirations. I've been hearing people say that the budget needs to be supported in a bipartisan manner, but in actuality, it should be nonpartisan because the education of our children is not political. And I'm asking the Board of Finance to reinstate the full budget as recommended by the Board of Education. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Baker, back to you.
Am I good now?
You're good now.
Okay. My name is Steve Baker. I am president of the Fairfield PTA Council, and I'm speaking on their behalf today. And to preface our statement to the board, I would like to share with you that our membership consists of 4,752 families and teachers in town, which due to COVID and the inability for our PTAs to hold membership and fundraiser drives in the same way we're accustomed to, is down from almost 7,000 members last year. I mention this because when town bodies in the past have failed to adequately support the proposed BOE budgets, the PTAs have done their best to fill the gaps with their contributions, both small and large. We regret that we may not be able to be relied on in that same capacity next year. So the following statement comes from the PTA Council. The PTA Council of Fairfield supports the Fairfield Public Schools operating budget for the 2021-22 school year as passed by the Fairfield Board of Education. We strongly encourage Fairfield's other town bodies to support and pass this budget as well. Having our schools fully funded is vital to the success of the Fairfield Public School students, staff, and our community as a whole. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baker. There's a name on the call, ANNAB. I see you up on the screen too. ANNAB.
Hey, it's Anna with the patch, here to listen, not to comment.
Okay, very good, thank you. We'll read your comments later on. Calling user number 5. Do you know who you are? Okay, I'll come back. Ms. Carol, Guerncy, Guernsey.
Hi, this is Carol Guernsey. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Great, thank you. I live at 241 Brookside Drive, and I really just wanted to thank you all for your service and for providing this opportunity for public comment. As the newest member of Fairfield's Board of Education, I'm calling in to convey my strongest support for the education budget. I hope you'll consider restoring $1.5 million to the budget to support the critical needs of our schools. As you know, this year we face the additional challenge of filling the hole from last year's educational budget. And while I obviously commend the creative use of the non-lapsing fund and the transportation rollover to help us achieve last year's zero increase budget, these measures obviously have created current budgeting challenges that we need to face in order to meet the needs of our students. I'm concerned that the $1.5 million cut to our proposed budget will impact the students and programs that are vital to the success of our schools. And I hope you'll consider with earnest the needs of our students and teachers who've been through an unimaginable year. We're only beginning to understand the impact the past year has had on instruction and social emotional health. And now is really not the time to jeopardize the progress we're just beginning to see only 3 weeks after fully reopening our schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Craig Curley.
Good morning. My name is Craig Curley. My address is 109 Lakewood Drive. I also want to thank you for your time this morning and thank you for your service to the town, especially through this long budget process. I know time's short, so I'll try and be brief. Last year, with the help of this board, the town made some tough decisions to hold the budget flat at zero or with a 0% increase. This was not proposed by the first selectman, but the Board of Finance recognized the need given the pandemic. That tough decision was made with the understanding that the hold on increases would be temporary. And this year would come with some increases. So a budget increase year over year was expected. However, a $19 million increase, which is a 6.5% increase year over year, I believe is both audacious and disrespectful to the residents of Fairfield. Nobody expected the increases that were deferred from last year would come back all at once, and then some. The pandemic last year lasted longer than anyone expected, and people in Fairfield are still hurting. To impose a $19 million increase, a 6.5% increase on Fairfield residents, I believe is tone deaf. Some proponents of this budget have said that the 6.5% increase looks larger than it really is because it's the equivalent of a little more than 3%, a 3% increase spread over 2 years, last year and this. But this town hasn't seen back-to-back 3% increases, and I can't remember how long, and I've been in town for 25 years. Some proponents of this budget have tried to spin the increase as being only 1.9%. The first select women's presentation initially even highlighted the increase as such. At first, I actually thought this was a mistake, an unfortunate mistake, because 1.9% relates to the mill rate increase, which is irrelevant in a revaluation year. Considering that this misinformation has been repeated, to me, it appears. I just asked this board to use its expertise to make some tough choices, to make cuts where it needs to, identify the components of the budget where increases cannot be deferred, and hold off on a full restoration until a time when we can afford it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curley. Ms. Jen Jacobson, welcome. Would you like to comment? Or you're on mute, Jen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, Chris, don't start that yet. All right. Hi, Jen Jacobson, 40 Victoria Court. Thank you so much for the opportunity this morning. I'm going to speak quite quickly. As is the case with the town budget, last year's actions were taken for this year to reduce the BOE budget and create a lapsing account. And everyone knew at that time that going forward, those funds plus our contractual obligations for the town for the upcoming year would be need to made whole. In my written statement that I'll provide to you, I do create a chart that demonstrates to you a negative 362,749 to accomplish that goal on the BOE side, while therefore on the town side, it has been made whole. Of course, you know, this doesn't include a transportation contract obligation of $249,000, and it would still leave a 1.637 million reduction to the BOE budget of the things that you went over in your meetings with our chair and the superintendent. Even with the lapsing account, you know that we are in a deficit that we are actively working to address right now, and all of the items that are currently frozen and it's funds for our building principals, vacancies, and building projects. Those will carry forward, but are not included as well. Yes, we are getting federal funds, as is the town. Town 13 million estimated to BOE 5 million estimated. Most of that, some of that has already been expended this year, but even with that money over through 2024 for all the students that we have with 14 different federal and state priority areas, that is not a lot of money. In addition to that, you know that there's a lot of unknowns still to come for next year that we are not aware of in terms of any additional requirements that are also not included. And I am personally actively working to address those, as they are millions and millions of dollars come July 1 that are not here. I'm going to include a note on health insurance savings because I know that's come up. But if you look back over the last 11 years on the website, you will see that 9 of 11 years there's been an overage in health insurance. So that estimated savings today aren't turning into actual savings later. Yes, I am asking for the $2 million restoration for a long list of reasons that I'm sure many of you are aware of. But at minimum, to apply the same rationale to the BOE side of the 362,749 that covers our whole plus the contractual obligations that you are considering.
2
I'm not
minutes.
going to go any. Okay.
No, you're over.
Thanks, Chris. Sorry. Thank you for the time and the considerations, and I'll send in a further statement written to you all and that explains some of this in greater detail. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jacobson. Ms. Jessica Gerber. Good morning.
Good morning, Jessica Gerber, 25 Shady Hill Road. Thank you very much for providing this opportunity for the public to speak to the budget. As a member of the Board of Education, I'm sure it's no surprise that I support the budget that was approved by the board. And I would appreciate a restoration of the funds that were reduced from that proposed budget by the Board of Selectmen. I think of all years, we really understand this year the importance and the value of a strong public school system in a town. And I think we're going to be seeing the impact of the pandemic in our schools for many years to come in myriad ways. And to reduce the requested funding increase, I think would really do a disservice to the students and staff of Fairfield Public Schools. So I would ask that you strongly consider restoring, if not all the funds, at least some of them, to allow us to try to move forward and provide the services and the education that our students deserve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gerber. Moving to Ms. Cassandra Marshall.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go
Hi,
ahead.
Cassandra Marshall, 112 Judge Street. I'm here to just give a final shout out for the conservation cuts. I sincerely believe cutting the staff will affect the ability for conservation to run at the level it needs during these times of growth. Conservation runs so many important programs to the health of this community. As a coastal community, it is our duty to have a strong conservation department that isn't overwhelmed running its programs, processing important permits, and dealing with townwide issues that come up. So please support our conservation department. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Ms. Kathy Braun.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. 2 minutes.
I'll be short. I gave my spiel before, and I thank you for allowing me 4 minutes. I just wanted to give a little bit of an update because I've also been involved ancillarily in this whole zoning law change issue. I won't go into that, but we are going to have zoning law changes, and it will put even more pressure on towns for high density developments, whether affordable or not. It's coming down the pike. It's probably going to happen. And we need more than ever to have a conservation department that's fully staffed to support the commission. This staff position that was removed was the person that solely did wetlands review. Now, as Ms. Cassandra pointed out, there are other things that go on in the conservation department that support many other commissions, and that's what the director primarily did. There was also a part-time employee that you have made, that I guess is being made full-time, but the commission wanted that part-time employee to be made full-time to support the workload of her regular job, which was enforcement work and doing lower level certificates of conformance. So this wetlands administrator job that's been cut, as well as the secretary job that's been cut, is going to severely impact the department. It may be able to do wetlands review, but it won't do it at the depth and breadth that we need and that we've come to count on for decades. I also don't think it was well founded. I don't think there was a real survey done, certainly not by an independent contractor who could, go to the different departments and evaluate them and compare them. We certainly haven't seen any survey. We haven't seen any results. I don't believe the director of this department was contacted. I think he was on his way out in November. And so the commission certainly wasn't contacted. So there was really nobody, I believe, with expertise on what our commission needs from its own staff that could have made this well-founded. And again, I just want to repeat, the wetlands program pays for the job that's been cut. The wetlands administrator, again, reviewed all wetlands applications, which become part of any development project where there's any wetlands or water courses, which I believe
That's 2 minutes.
Yep, okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Braun. And again, I just want to say that if you want to take your comments, put them in an email, send them to the Board of Finance, please do. If you can't get everything in that you'd like to say, we will certainly read them. We don't answer them all, but we do read them, believe me. So that's an option for you as well.
Thank you, thank you.
Ms. Katie Flynn.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Katie Flynn, 204 Grandview Road. I am speaking in support of the Fairfield Public Schools operating budget as approved by the Board of Education. This budget represents the needs of our students and our staff after living and learning through a global pandemic. This crisis has impacted the education and mental health of the school-aged children of our community in unimaginable and frankly still undetermined ways. As the Fairfield Public Schools rebuild and assess the needs of their students, now is the time that our schools need our community's full support and funding. We as a community faced a storm last year and knew that this year's budget would be a tough process. I was incredibly disappointed to see comments that this tax increase was known and to be expected. The problem I see with that thought process is not in its intention, but in fact in its lack of consistency. Yes, the Board of Selectmen's proposed budget met all of its contractual and agreed upon contingencies in their proposed budget, but their reduction to the Board of Education would leave the Board of Ed unable to do the same. The increase to the BOE budget includes the hole from the non-lapsing account and contractual obligations that the Board of Education and Board of Finance supported and voted on. The Board of Education does not operate with a contingency, and we have seen the effects of this over the decades. It's incredibly short-sighted to imagine that further needs may not exist after what the public schools have experienced these past 2 years. The town has proposed a dramatic increase in their budget spending and consequently the tax burden of that on its citizens. The idea that the town can afford to do this while reducing the education budget as our students and staff are in an unprecedented educational upheaval is misaligned with the values I see of this community. I implore the Board of Finance to restore the funds reduced by the Board of Selectmen and give our students and staff all they need to rebuild back better. Thank you to the Board of Finance for facilitating this forum. I appreciate all of your hard work and dedication throughout the budget process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Flynn. Ms. Kimberly Grant.
Hi there, I'm just here listening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mary Ho, welcome.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm mostly calling in to ask to have you reinstate the conservation position. I'm very concerned that as a coastal town during climate change and with an expected sea level rise of at least 20 inches over the next few years, that this position is a very important position. A big part of our tax base is in this flood zone, and this department that will be managing our most important resource to help mitigate this problem, our marshes, is so important. And why would we do anything other than to keep this department fully staffed and funded? So please restore this administrator position. The Conservation Department supports 5 commissions, and no other department does this. 2 of them are, I believe, fulfill statutory requirements. This department does highly technical and scientific reports requiring a high level of expertise, something that a floater could not possibly do. And having this current staffing would mean no second in command to take the reins when necessary. Fairfield was the first town in the state to have a conservation department and an open space manager. And as Ms. Braun pointed out, this position is fully funded by the fees that it takes in. So it really would be a net zero in terms of a budget, as far as I can tell. So I really hope that I will stay within my 2 minutes and just hope that you will reinstate this position, because it really seems that it's an essential need for the town. It's not really a want, it's a need, and it's a budgetary net zero. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Rabab Hussein, did I say that right, I hope?
You did, Rabab. Well,
Bob, welcome.
welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for giving us the opportunity to speak. I'm um, uh, every year we come in and we really feel like we're listened to and appreciated in terms of public comment, and I thank you for that opportunity personally. I'm here first of all as a parent. I have an eighth grader now at the Fairfield Woods Middle School. And can everyone still hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was on mute. We can hear you. You're spitting a little bit, but we can still hear you.
Hi, can anyone hear me?
Yes.
You can. Okay,
You can.
sorry. Everyone's kind of like going off and on my screen here. I have no idea what's going on. So firstly, as a parent, I have an eighth grader at Fairfield Woods Middle School, and I have a fourth grader who's in the CLC complex learning classroom at Osborne Hill. He has special needs. He's autistic, and I just want to make an appeal for you to support as much as possible, preferably fully, the Board of Ed's recommendation for their budget. I could only reiterate what everyone has fantastically already said over here, and that the $1.5 million in education reductions will have an impact on the children of our district. I really always am concerned as an advocate for special needs for my little guy. So that's always something that's at the front of my own concern for any cuts with regard to education. So, that would just be my one plea. My second is to conservation. Again, as Mary reiterated, Mary had just spoken to, so had Catherine. It's just a net zero situation. So it sort of kind of doesn't almost make sense to me from where I'm sitting to make the cut for that one position. But in general, our conservation department does, again, support the 5 commissions: conservation, harbor management, inland wetland, land acquisition, shellfish commissions. There's such an asset, the department of itself is such an asset to our community. Along with Mary, I'm a member of the Sustainable Fairfield Task Force. Fairfield has always been the model.
2 minutes.
Okay, so just thank you so much for your time and for your consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Miss R.K. Noor.
Hi, good morning. My name is autofilled on the WebEx. I'm Riney Noor, 83 Alberta Street, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in front of the Board of Finance at the public forum once again. I have 4 children, the youngest of which is a senior at Fairfield Wood High School, and the 3 older ones, they all went through the Fairfield Public School system. Furthermore, I'm a volunteer with Mill River Wetland Committee, with Fairfield Cares Community Coalition. My boys were all scouts, so we're very entrenched in the community in the over 20 years that we've lived here. And I'm speaking today in support of the education budget and to please reinstate at least the 1.5 million that is needed to make them whole as we currently see the funds, because I do believe children starting kindergarten this year deserve the same opportunity that my children enjoyed over all these years. My oldest is 23 years old. And I also speak on behalf of the conservation position in my role as an environmentalist. And I also speak on behalf of the other not-for-profits and the library, all of which are so vital in ensuring our young people's mental health that we see is the foundation to living a good and productive life. The cost of society to young people that self-medicate and then need services that we are not willing or able to provide is much higher than the cost in education and prevention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going back up to look for more participants. I believe I called on everybody so far. There is a call-in user 5. So if you have not spoken, can you send me a chat? Chrissy Kelly. Chris, are you with us? And you're on mute. You're on mute if you want to speak. Okay, I'm going to go back to call-in user 5. I don't want people to say I didn't give them an opportunity to speak. So I'm just going to take my time here, if you don't mind.
Call-in user 5 isn't coming up in the chat box, so I have a feeling it's someone's phone who's called in as well as the video.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chris, for that. Yeah, we don't quite get the participation, right, as we do when we're together and we're live and we're at one of the high schools. And that's understandable. And as we all start to get our shots and this COVID situation moves on, I'm sure we'll be able to do so next year. I do look forward for our board to be able to meet in person without masks. And hopefully that'll be in the fall, perhaps. So I don't see anybody else on this list. Okay, I'm getting notes that said I didn't mean to raise my hand. I just dialed in. So I believe I called in everybody so far. And what I like to do, I think Mr. Baker already spoke. I'm getting a chat about Mr. Baker, but I think Mr. Baker spoke. Mr. Baker, you spoke in the beginning of the meeting representing PTA.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here's what we'll do. I'm going to give the Board of Finance members an opportunity to speak and share our thoughts. As individual Board of Finance member, and each member will speak for themselves. And I'll just start down our list of our members that were able to make it. And I'm going to start with Mr. Jack Testani. Mr. Testani.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jack Testani. For the record, it's 109 Meadowcrest Drive. I thank everyone for coming out today. I just want to reassure everybody that, of course, everyone's comments are well received. There's plenty of information. I wrote down a majority of it, and all of the comments and all the decisions are always put into what the final outcome of the budget was both last year and this year. I think a lot of people are aware, or if you're not aware, were some significant cliffs between what's called OPEB and the retirement pension funds that the first select woman did decide to fully fund this year that were not funded last year. That helped to result in the 0% tax increase. So there were significant dollars that were allocated for those two pieces of the budget in addition to some of the other issues that we've been talking about today. So again, I just want to reassure everybody that all of this information will be assessed in terms of making the decision. And again, thank everyone for your time and interest and effort on behalf of the beautiful town of Fairfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testani. I did have one more participant, and this could be, so what I'm going to do is I'll go to the participants and I'll come back to the board if I see someone come through before we're speaking. Mr. Gerber, I see you joined us. Thank you. Would you like to make a comment?
Oh, I just really joined to listen, but I will make one comment, not a terribly important one, but I think one thing that's been nagging me a little bit is I haven't been able to see from the town's PR and from questions asked to the Board of Selectmen what exactly the expectation is for the average increase in taxes that people are going to pay in Fairfield, both residential and commercial. And I think, really for the first time that I can recall, there was an increase in mill rate described in a press release, which is really meaningless when your appraised valuation is going up by 4.5%. I think, you know, and I was very supportive of the first select woman. I voted for her. I voted for her VRIP. I spent hours and hours with her, trying to help her, tell her what I thought needed to be done with the VRIP, as did many other Democrats. Spent hours with her and actually supported her effort to modernize Town Hall. But then to see sort of an inability to sort of come out and just tell people what they should expect to see in terms of the increase in their taxes was a little disturbing to me, because it didn't seem like a very transparent way of approaching, sort of laying the groundwork for what people should expect. And so what I hope from the Board of Finance, which is always, in my opinion, or historically, the Board of Finance has always been sort of somewhat above politics. I know everyone's political, but somewhat above politics. And I always felt we're kind of straight shooters on a lot of topics. I would hope that before you vote on this budget, you get a straight answer for the people of Fairfield, what they should expect on average their tax increase to be. And that really just involves the appraised values, any new construction. People should know, and it's pretty obvious it's going to be somewhere around 6%. I think it should be said transparently so that we can deal with it. There may be great reasons for that increase in 6%, but let's not hide that fact. And then let's not put a 2% mill rate increase for the town next to a supposed 5% increase for the Board of Ed. I think those things are really discouraging for normal people looking at this who kind of know what's going on and don't like
2 minutes, Mr. Gerber.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gerber. Okay, I don't see anyone else that called in, so I'm going to go back to the Board of Finance, and I am going to ask Ms. Lori Charlton to make a comment, if you wish.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So first, I want to say a sincere thanks to all the members of the public who called in to provide public comment, and also to everyone who took the time to write to us and give us their perspectives. Obviously, there are a lot of different views, and at the end of the day, it's all about balance. How do we do the right thing for our community, both in terms of services, education, and also affordability, which is really important. I've made my views public already, but just in brief, I do have to say that I think that the tax increase in this proposed budget is unacceptably high. And that increase, both in terms of the percentage and the actual dollars, is not driven by education spending, as many believe. It's driven by spending on the town side. And as we've discussed in prior meetings, and as many of my colleagues have pointed out rightly, a good amount of that spending on the town side is an unavoidable consequence of cuts we made and expenses we deferred last year. No doubt about it. But not all of it. So if we take the noise out of the equation, last year, this year, what we cut, what holes we're trying to fill, and we look at this on a 2-year average, our gross tax levy is up an average of 3.7% annually over the last 2 years. And from what I can tell, I've looked at budgets at this point from all of the towns that have published them in Fairfield County, and also West Hartford, which is typically a town that we view as a comparable in terms of size and wealth. Our 2-year increase on average is about double our surrounding communities, not on the education side, but on the town side. And that's not because we did anything unusual last year. In fact, all of our peers did the same thing we did last year. Faced with economic uncertainty in the early days of the pandemic, they cut their budgets last year, many even more than us. They had holes to fill just like we do. But what they didn't do is try to solve every issue created by those cuts and the pandemic all at once through a tax increase this year. I will say I am we need responsible budgeting practices. I'm a believer in keeping a healthy level of reserves and fund balance. I believe we need to fully fund our contractual long-term liabilities. But I do think we need to take a hard look at this budget, because what I don't believe we can afford is to provide for millions of dollars of additional fund balance when we're looking at a 6.5% increase. I think we need to build back in a way that's not completely insensitive to taxpayers. And I also believe that we need to show restraint on any discretional, non-recurring spending that could potentially be funded by the $25 million of federal money that Fairfield's going to get under the American Recovery Act. There are clearly some unanswered questions about how that money can be used, but we can't ignore the fact that it's coming, and we certainly should do everything we can to lessen the fiscal 22 tax burden for our residents with that money. So again, I thank everyone else for everyone who joined and provided comment, and we take all of it seriously, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to Mr. Mottola, I'm going to go to Mr. DeWitt next. Ms. Jennifer Maxine Kennelly joined us. Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, please.
Please go on.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Jennifer Maxine Kennelly of Edgewood Place, and I'm calling in regarding two topics. First, to advocate for the Board of Education budget. I certainly appreciate the support of and the collaboration with the Board of Finance last year. And I also appreciate the reference by Mr. Walsh during this year's budget review process, which attested to the work the Board of Ed has done for years in finding economic efficiencies to support each year's educational enhancements. But I would be remiss if I did not say publicly that the reduction put in place by the First Selectwoman and Board of Selectmen is going to impact our students negatively at a time when we can ill afford cutting staff, delaying maintenance projects, or postponing curricular improvements. However, I'm also calling in today to ask that you reconsider the reduced staffing model being proposed for our conservation department. I fully support being open to a new model in town hall, one that could be more effective and more efficient. However, I'm opposed to these changes at this time for two reasons regarding both the practical and environmental long-term impact. First, as the eyes of the state turn to Fairfield with the trials looming for our former town employees, there's no way to put a positive spin on this notion that our town is reducing staff that has direct oversight over some vital land issues. It invites questions of what is Fairfield looking to hide, or what business as usual could we be looking to continue? Second, it's also a poor decision when you consider that people with the most pertinent inside knowledge of what this department needs did not help advise on this restructuring. The most recent person in the leadership role is now our discredited former employee. I think especially of local advocates like TPZ member Kathy Braun, who can whip off an essay full of sound legal and environmental impact issues which argue against this move. We're a large town with open spaces that we treasure, competing with developers and others who would trample on the environment. A fully staffed conservation department is a vital town investment. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Going back to the Board of Finance, Mr. DeWitt.
Good morning, everyone. Chris DeWitt, I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board of Finance, and thank you for calling in today. 2021 has been called a lot of things. I think it's the year of cliffs. For crying out loud, it should be a Steinbeck novel, the way we've been talking about cliffs. But unfortunately, I think the end of this budget year is going to have a happy ending, unlike a Steinbeck novel, in the fact that we have a very transparent and fully funded budget. There's been a lot of statements made here today, political statements, frankly, about transparency. I think the First Selectwoman couldn't have been more transparent. Mr. Gerber even said himself, the First Selectwoman brought RTM members in. She brought in Board of Finance members. She brought in Board of Ed members. Not Democrats, not Republicans. She brought in all of us. And she talked about this budget, and the budget is as we have it now, and now it's the Board of Finance's job to finish our part of the process and hand it to the RTM. You know, people often ask me, what's the role of the Board of Finance? And I half jokingly, half seriously say that we are advocates for the causes that no one cares about. Yes, we vote on the Board of Education budget. Yes, we vote on paving and all the other things that people care about. But we have to be the advocates for our obligations, for our fund balance, for these things behind the scenes that are great things that we talk about. AAA bond rating. How's our, you know, our concentration in the waterfall? No one walks around with a shirt saying save contingency or fund OPEB, but we have to, and that's our role. And I love hearing all the passionate responses about the Board of Ed and the library and conservation. I think it's wonderful, and I think it's a real testimony to the, you know, the depth and the passion that our fellow town folk and taxpayers have. Rainey Nor, I'm looking at right now. She's one of the most passionate people I know. She was actually my son's Cub Scout leader. No one's more passionate. And I'll tell you what I think at the end of the day is this: we have a budget before us. Yes, we have to fund things on the town side. We have to talk about our infrastructure, and this budget does. This budget fully funds all of our obligations, and we can have a discussion about 6%, or we can have a talk about whatever the mill rate increase of less than 2%. But the bottom line is, this budget, which I support, is doing what the town needs right now. It's helping us recover our cliffs from last year, and it's helping us move to next year. And it's helping instill a new future for the town, which the first select woman has very clearly articulated to all the taxpayers. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I hand it back to you. Thank you.
Hold on, I make the same mistake everyone else does. I'm speaking on mute, even after a year of this. Mr. Mottola.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. John Mottola. I live on Surrey Lane in beautiful Fairfield, Connecticut. Thank you all for coming out here today. It's much appreciated. I'm glad we were able to have this meeting. I'm not going to say a lot of things this morning. I do want to touch on the Conservation Department issue. And I've heard all the comments with respect to that. This board doesn't have the authority to reinstate a position. I just want all of you to understand that. I suppose we could put the money back into that position, but there's no obligation on the part of the first select woman to you know, have someone in that position right now. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I respect what you're saying, and I agree with it, but I don't think there's a lot we can do with respect to that. And the first select woman is the town manager. She's made a decision. She's going to live or die with that decision. And we just, you know, we need to keep on top of that to see if it's working or not working. So, but I understand what you're saying, and, you know, many of us may agree with what you're saying, but I don't think there's a lot we can do about it as a Board of Finance. So I wanted to make that clear. With respect to the overall budget, I pretty much echo what Ms. Charlton said a few minutes ago. I'm not going to repeat all those things. But I would like to shine some light on what I think may happen. I thought we had a really good meeting Thursday night as a board, and I think there are going to be ways that we're going to be able to reduce this tax burden on the citizens of Fairfield, and hopefully we can do that. I do think a 6% spending increase is way too much, especially during a reval year. Usually when you have a reevaluation, the mill rate at least stays the same or it goes down. That's not what's happening this year. But again, I thought we had a good meeting Thursday, and I think we're going to be able to do some things to fill some of these cliffs that we created from last year's budget, and not have such a large tax increase for our taxpayers. So thank you very much for coming out, and I look forward to getting this process over with next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Mr. Walsh.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for participating in this process. It's always one of my favorite days to hear from the public, so I really appreciate it. And we do listen to your comments and take them into account during our deliberation. So I want to talk about a couple of things and I guess comment on some things that have already been said, but I'll try to be brief. The first one that seems to come up is, let's just talk about the budget in general, and there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of chatter that it's a 6.3% tax increase, and really nothing to me could be further from the truth. Number one, the total expense budget, if you just look at that line, and I'm looking at the budget right now, it's 5.77, but let's talk about the 5.77 as a spending increase, because every single member of the Board of Finance and every single RTM member cut the budget to zero because we had just entered a pandemic. Matter of fact, our budget meeting shouldn't even happen in March. We were put off till April. This is like a month earlier than it was last year because of the pandemic. And we didn't know where this was going, and the whole world was shut down at that point in time. So this board took it extremely seriously, not knowing what people are going to have to do with jobs and things like that. And while we are pulling out of this thing, and thank God we all have vaccines in an amazing short amount of time, we knew coming into this budget year that we had created all these cliffs last year. On the Board of Ed side, it was, this is not an exact number, but about $2.5 million. But we had created cliffs, things we didn't fund that we normally fund, things that we would never, ever do other than a pandemic. That was over $10 million worth of the $18 million that Mr. Curley and others spoke about today. So that money had to go back in. And there's not one member who's on this, because I know them all, who would make a suggestion that we shouldn't fund the cliff for education, that we should really cut the $18 million, take 2.5 out of the Board of Ed budget and reduce that. No. We had talked last year we were going to restore these cliffs. We were going to be fiscally responsible and restore them. So out of the $18 million spending increase, over $10 million was just to restore cliffs. Now let's look at the other $8 million. The other $8 million consists of salary increases. The teachers just got a great contract, and we fully funded that, and that's fully funded in the budget. The town of Fairfield has unions that we have union contracts with. Clearly, we have to fund those increases. Health insurance, everything, electricity costs, everything else in the town goes up. So it's not as though the spending is anything unusual or that we know about. What is a little bit unusual is people calling me, all of a sudden for the first time ever, I've been doing this for over 20 years, is to call the expense increase a tax increase. Never happened. I've never heard that term ever in my life. Previous first selectmen, go back to Mr. Tetro's budget. Go back to Mr. Flato's budget. The expense budget is always higher than what the mill rate increase is. So some of this is politics and some of it is whatever, but it's a tough year. We're coming back from a pandemic, and we are trying to fill, I think this budget fills all of our long-term liabilities, and it catches us up from the pandemic, where we're going to go forward next year without these cliffs. It's going to be back to a normal year. But a lot of this $18 million of spending increase is from the pandemic, more than half of it. And really nobody can argue with that. It's just what it is. All right. I would like to thank the first select woman for a couple of things. First, as a town, her guidance through the pandemic. I'd like to thank her. I'd like to thank our health department for all the good work that they've done during this entire period, and also our first responders, police, fire, nurses, who've done an amazing job having to pivot as things have changed. It's just been an extraordinary time, took a lot of expense. Thank God we have the state and the federal government picking up some of those funds. But I'd also like to thank her for the courage for fully funding our long-term liabilities. Many of us, I know Ms. Charlton has joined me, have always been concerned about long-term liabilities, and she fully funded those. And that took courage in this year to come back with this pandemic to fully fund those. And we'll be talking about a lot more about fund balance and whatever. But I will tell you, fund balance, I've been studying it for many years. You know, under the Plato administration, it had been down since 2013 to 5%, which was a completely unacceptable number. And we have fought hard, made sacrifices to get that up to the 11% it is now. And I really don't want to go backwards on that. I heard some people discussing the American Recovery Act, which is great. This town's going to be getting a lot of money, which we have no idea what the rules are. Our Board of Finance, and I thank our chairman, Jim Brown, keeps bringing it up, making the town comment on it. We've asked the Board of Ed for updates on their portion, because the Board of Ed is going to be, with various different accounts, going to be cutting close to $5 million to be split over like 2 years. Much of that money we've heard is to help students who have not had complete learning catch up, which is great, because we all know things have been challenging over the last year, and some kids have fallen behind. And the superintendent has acknowledged that at our meetings. So it's going to be great, and if you're a parent and you feel like your students fall behind, contact your Board of Ed member, contact the superintendent, and then we're going to be laying out a plan on how your child might be able to get some help with some of those funds to have your child catch up. But on the town side, in regards to the additional funds we're going to be getting in, since we don't know how we can spend the money, there's been a couple comments about whether we can take things out of our budget and use some of the funds we have coming in from the American Recovery Act to help lower the budget in certain areas. The problem is that most of what we heard is that you can't use this to lower your taxes or pay for things that are in your budget. But we can't tell you, the U.S. Treasury Department can't tell us what the regulations for how that money is going to be used. So the first selectwoman laid out for us the other day, you know, some priorities and things and how we're going to be able to use it for things that we have on our waterfall chart, which show projects that are going to be coming up, and to hopefully get some of those paid so they don't have to be paid for in future budgets. It'll be a great thing, and I think that's probably the best way to do it, because we can't take things out of our budget when we don't know the regulations of how that money can be spent, because otherwise we could have huge holes in our budget. There's also just one last comment, you know, I think it was Mr. Gerber raised about the mill rate and how the mill rate can be going up despite the grand list increase of approximately 4%. I've read some others talking about this on social media, suggesting, you know, we're going to have, you know, I think Mr. Gerber suggested we might have 6% increases and wanted to know what the average tax increase is going to be. I don't think anybody knows what the average tax increase is going to be, because it's the average tax increase per taxpayer. What I do know from getting presentations from the assessor and the company that did the revaluation is the following. 1/3 of the properties in this town, I'm just talking about residential right now, went down in their revaluation. They're going to be seeing a tax cut. 1/3 of the properties stayed approximately the same. So they'll have their mill rate increase. That's it. And 1/3 of the properties went up in value. They will be seeing a mill rate increase plus whatever the increase of their properties are. I don't think I'm telling anybody breaking news that over the last 5 years, different areas of town went up and down in value. We all know that Greenfield Hill, until the pandemic and people from New York started buying those properties, it was their price values went down over time for certain reasons. The beach area became a very popular area to live, and the prices went up. That's why under state statute, we have to do a revaluation every 5 years. So the revaluation is the revaluation. And I know there's some who suggest, you know, this is not a good thing. And, you know, hey, I'm one of the people that houses went up way in value. And I understand, but you know what's a good thing about that? Yeah, my taxes may go up and will go up, not may, will go up pretty substantially. But the good news on that is my house value went up a lot in value. I'll make that trade-off any day of the week. So what everyone's average tax increase is going to be is impossible to say. Really, it's what each individual taxpayer's increase is going to be. And that will be determined during the revaluation process, which most of you know what your numbers are. Some are in appeals. And that appeal process is not done, and from what I understand, it's going to be a lot longer before it's determined. And what happens with those appeals and how much the Board of Assessment takes off of those values will also have an effect on tax increases. It just will. So in closing, I'd just like to say I think we have a lot of work to do. I agree with Mr. Matola's analysis. I think we had a great meeting the other night. I think we learned some things. I think we found some areas that we can reduce. I think that our board is going to work in a nonpartisan way, try to figure out what we can do to kind of lower the mill rate maybe a little bit and see what we can do, and try to come to consensus. But that's where we stand as today. But once again, I want to thank everybody for coming out and listening to my words. I'm sorry if I spoke too long.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. So I'd just like to follow up, and Mr. Walsh got into some great detail, as did some other Board of Finance members, so I'm not going to do that, although I have all my notes, right, after all these months of all the percentages and the numbers. You know, the one advantage of our town government is that each board gets more information than the previous board. So our Board of Finance has more information than the Board of Selectmen had when they voted, and the RTM will have more information than we have when they voted. I too want to compliment the first selectwoman because I think she made the right decisions with the information she had before her, and she passed it on to the Board of Finance, as did the Board of Selectmen. I would point out too, as we all know, every budget is intertwined with the previous budget, and this budget's no exception. We don't have like separate budgets. Budgets are built upon each other, right, based on decisions that were made the previous year. And last year, as has been stated, we were passed on a budget from the Board of Selectmen, and then COVID hit, and we had to redo the whole budget. And we all remember that. And we passed on an increase to the RTM, a mill rate increase of 0.37, and spending went up minimal. But as we stated last year, and we stated it repeatedly, we did not reduce expenses that much. What we did was we reduced funding by $10.4 million, specifically our long-term liabilities, and we went into our reserves. And there's a big difference because the expenses don't go away. The liabilities are contractual obligations. They're inherited costs from previous administration and from RTM votes on contracts. And they build upon each other. And the funding of these liabilities were delayed last year, but the liabilities themselves remained. Okay, we owe the money. So a year later, the first select woman, she funded the long-term liabilities, including these cliffs in these 2022 budgets, and we asked her to. So on the town side and on the Board of Ed side, she made up for the funding that we did not include in the budget. And I want to compliment her for that, because she could have said, she could have made a decision, and she did talk to us, you know, OPEB liabilities, the pension, should we take a year off? Should we take another year off on that? And we would have said no. We would have said that is not something that we could agree to. And one of the reasons, not only do we owe the money, but we're all very much proud of and need our AAA credit rating. And funding these liabilities ensure our AAA credit rating, as does the fund balance, because we borrow money to support our infrastructure. And we've had a lot of projects over the years to support our infrastructure. And I'll just give some examples. Penfield Pavilion, Holland Hill, Smith Richardson Clubhouse, Sherman School, Mill Hill. We have a new ECC Center, Osborne Hill, partial roof, Fairfield Woods High School. Every year we look at these capital projects. Capital projects, just in the past 5 years, was a total of $87 million, almost $88 million. Our borrowing rate is extremely low. Our bond counsel said ridiculously low. And so that is purely because we fund our long-term liabilities and we have a fund balance, and the AAA credit rating agencies, the credit rating agencies, I should say, look at us and give us a AAA. And so the first select woman handed us a budget that fully funds those obligations. So in respect to the 6%, on page 4 of the budget lays it out. And on that page, you'll see OPEB. And OPEB is almost $4 million. And that was a cliff from last year. We did not fully fund OPEB. You take OPEB out of that town expense, you're down to 2.47%. In there also is pension. It's about $300,000 in addition to last year. Take that out, it's about 2%. Other than that, you have capital replacement costs. We reduced our capital outlay last year for the town. This year, we're including it. What is included in that line? Police equipment, fire equipment, DPW equipment, technology. That's in the capital outlay. That's in the town. You also have some other, which is, what's labeled as other, which is about $397,000. I don't want to bore us with details. I just want to make the point that the bulk of the town increase is the OPEB and the pension money we owe. Then you have some shared town costs to town and the Board of Ed that we share. And a big part of that is this fund balance that comes up. Now, fund balance is something else that the credit agencies look at it, and they look at it because we can control that. And they actually want us between 10 to 15% at least, and that's where we need to stay. Now, when I talk about more information coming our way that the first select woman did not have, and that is this year's surplus. And we talked about this Thursday night, and we had a good discussion, as Mr. Mottola said. We're going to discuss this on Monday. The first select woman didn't know about the surplus coming in, but we now know, and we're going to deliberate that on Monday, and we'll come to a conclusion. What we need to do is contribute to the surplus. It's extremely important we do that. What we will talk about is how we will do that and the timing of that. And as we've discussed the mill rate and perhaps lowering the mill rate, that will be a center of attention. That's something that we will discuss. And then we have our contractual obligations that we have to ensure that we're covered, because we know contracts are coming up and they'll be voted on. So when we talk about the town budget, I just want to say there is not like this slush fund. There's not this huge contingency that we can work towards and reduce. But there is options that we have that we can lower our tax rate and therefore lower our mill rate. We've done, our board, we work together well. I believe we communicated well with the first select woman. I think she did produce a budget that was fiscally responsible. Does it mean, because of the new information that we have, that we cannot look for adjustments? And as Mr. Mottola said, the staffing changes she made, that is up to her. She felt she's making them in the best interest of the town by improving services, technology, amongst other things. And so she will stand by those decisions, and we'll see where that takes us. One last comment. You know, as we look at these budgets, we also have to look at the future, and there are uncertainties coming down the pike that we don't know, but that we discussed. And part of that is something that conservation has sort of talked about, and that is really the criminal activity due to the fill pot that this administration needs to face. We have litigation that we're going to have to pay for. Remediation we're going to have to pay for, either out of the town budget or through bonding. We know that's coming, and we need to make sure that the town is financially ready to deal with those issues. So we will be diligent. Again, I'm glad we had this meeting. I want to thank everybody for being here. Please continue to communicate with us as we work through this together. As Ms. Charlton said, I agree, it is a balancing act. You know, this board has always supported the Board of Ed. 12 years I've been on this board, we support the Board of Ed and their mission and everything that they're trying to do. And we will continue to do so. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time here today. And have a great weekend. And look, we meet on Monday. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Keep the emails coming, and keep your opinions coming. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Everybody.